You ready to dive in deep today?
Always up for a good deep dive.
Well, get this, we're tackling Bengali food traditions.
Oh, interesting.
Not just any food, though, but what they offer to their deities. It's wild. We're talking medieval Bengali literature, hardcore research papers, even some mythological analysis.
Sounds like we've got a feast of information to dig into.
It's not just recipes, that's for sure. This stuff makes you think about food and faith in a whole new way.
I bet. Food is such a powerful lens for understanding a culture.
And to guide us through it all, we've got a bona fide expert in cultural anthropology and foodways. Okay, so before we get lost in the details, set the scene for us. What kind of dishes are we talking about here? I was flipping through the research earlier, and some of this stuff sounds pretty elaborate.
Oh, definitely. Bengali cuisine is incredibly diverse and flavorful. We'll be looking at everything from simple lentil dishes to elaborate fish curries.
Speaking of fish curries, like Pabda Shukdo catfish in a stewed curry and Tolti Ili, which is a fried hilsa fish, those aren't exactly everyday meals, right?
You're right. Some of those were definitely reserved for special occasions. And you've hit on a really interesting point. The sources show this stark contrast between these lavish feasts and the simpler foods of the poor.
So food as a status symbol then, too. Fascinating.
Absolutely. The academic term for all of this is gastronomy.
Gastronomy, I've heard that word.
It's not just a fancy word for cooking, though. It's about understanding the whole relationship between food and culture, history, ecology, even social hierarchy.
Right. It's all connected.
And these ancient Bengali texts we're looking at, they're like little windows into all of that.
Okay, so incredible dishes, a link to social standing. But here's what I'm really curious about. Why offer food to the gods in the first place?
The million-dollar question.
It's not just about them getting hungry, right? There's got to be something deeper going on.
You're absolutely right. It's not about feeding the gods in a literal sense. The act of offering food is deeply symbolic in Bengal. It's about showing respect to the deities, seeking their blessings, and even purifying one's own heart.
So it's about the intention behind it, not just the food itself.
Exactly. And each offering carries its own meaning, too.
Like what?
Well, take milk, for example.
Okay, milk. Pretty basic.
Right. But in Hindu mythology, it's seen as this symbol of purity and divine abundance. So offering milk to a deity isn't just about quenching their thirst, it's about invoking those qualities.
That's really interesting. It's like symbolic language.
Exactly.
But what about the offerings that seem, I don't know, a little more particular? Like, I noticed some no-go foods, garlic and onions, and even certain types of bananas were off limits. What's up with those culinary taboos?
Ah, yes. Well, some of those restrictions stem from ancient beliefs about the energy associated to different foods.
Energy.
Yeah, like some foods are considered tamasic in Hindu traditions. It refers to foods believed to kind of cloud the mind and spirit. So the idea is that food offered to the gods needs to be pure, something that promotes clarity and connection, not the opposite.
So it's like choosing the right fuel for a sacred fire. You wouldn't want to dampen the flames with the wrong ingredients.
That's a great way to put it.
But speaking of preferences, I was reading about Lord Krishna. Apparently, he's got a legendary sweet tooth.
Oh, absolutely. Butter, sweets, you name it.
Yeah, like he's got a weakness for butter and coconut lattice. Is it common for deities to have such specific tastes? Is that a thing?
It really is. Each deity has their own personality, their own role in the mythology, and the foods they're offered often reflect that.
Okay, so it's not random, like each food is a little clue.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. Like you mentioned Lord Krishna and his thing for sweets. Well, he's often portrayed as this playful, cowherd. Very tied to nature, abundance, dairy, especially those decadent forms, fits right in, you see.
So, a god of simple pleasures, enjoying what the land provides. That tracks. But it does make you wonder. Those elaborate dishes we talked about earlier, those were for special occasions. What did a typical food offering ceremony look like?
Good question. It wasn't always a huge feast or anything. Sometimes the simplest offerings were seen as, the most pure, the most sacred. But the thing is, no matter what was being offered, it was really the how that mattered just as much as the what.
Oh, tell me more about that. Was it a whole ritual? Like, if you were lucky enough to witness one of these Bengali food offering ceremonies, what would you see?
Okay, picture this. You walk into a space, maybe it's a home, maybe it's a temple. The air is just like heavy with incense. You might hear some soft chanting going on in the background. And there's this sense of reverence. As the food, often super carefully arranged on these special plates, special bowls, is presented to the deity.
Creating a whole vibe, an atmosphere. So it's more than just like the physical act of giving food.
Way more. It's about connecting with the divine. And they use this shared cultural language to do that, food being a powerful one, obviously.
Speaking of cultural language, you mentioned earlier that some of these traditions point to like a bigger story about Bengal.
Yeah, totally. Like the Intu Puja, remember that one?
Refresh my memory.
Celebrating germinated grains.
Right, right.
Which, think about it, are a symbol of fertility, abundance,
Yeah.
new life. And for Bengalis, it highlights how deeply they connect food to life itself. It's sacred. And it speaks to how important agriculture was in the region, how their understanding of the divine was literally woven into growing food.
It's like their whole cosmology is reflected in a bowl of sprouted grains. That's incredible. Anything else like that you came across?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like the offering of sugarcane. It was supposed to appease destructive forces, which, if you think about how vulnerable that region is to natural disasters.
Makes sense. It's like they're acknowledging that power of nature, the potential for good and bad, and trying to find balance.
Exactly. And it really makes you think, right, how many other cultures out there wove their fears, their hopes, their whole understanding of the world into food traditions?
And here we are in the modern day, just like going to the store, grabbing whatever, don't even think twice about where it came from.
It's true, but hey, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've got grocery stores, it's convenient.
Sure enough.
But I do think we could stand to learn a thing or two from these older practices. Imagine if we brought even a little bit of that intentionality, that reverence, to our own meals.
Right. Like, pause before we dig in, appreciate the food, the people who made it, everything it took to get to our plates.
Now you're getting it.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be religious or anything. It's more about mindful consumption, respecting the source.
totally. It's not about copying those old ways exactly, but maybe finding ways to bring that thoughtfulness, that intention into our modern lives.
Yeah, exactly. Like remembering that food, it's not just fuel for the body. It's culture. It's history.
Yeah.
It's a connection to something much bigger than ourselves.
Like that saying, what is it? You are what you eat. But
Yeah.
this is like next level.
Right. Especially these days when food feels so, I don't know, mass-produced, like it's just disconnected.
Yeah.
Getting back to that sense of meaning, that reverence, it just feels more important than ever.
It really does. Wow. We've covered a lot of ground today. Talked about some specific dishes, cultural things, the historical side of it, even dipped into a bit of mythology.
All through the lens of food.
Of course.
Because like we've seen, something as basic as a meal, it can unlock so much about a culture,
Yeah.
their beliefs, their values, everything.
Totally. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. This whole deep dive into Bengali food offerings has definitely given me a lot to digest.
Me too.
Yeah.
It reminds you that there's always more to learn, more to really savor with every bite.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. If you had to offer a meal to something divine, what would it be? And what would it say about you? About your own connection to food, to your culture, to something bigger? Think about that.